is quite often singular. So you don't have a well-defined solution for the equation. So you need a little bit of sigma. And that's why there's a very deep reason to study the small but non-zero limit of sigma, which is exactly what semi-classic is. So, okay. And we'll see that this shares many similarity with good old semi-classical physics. Okay. So I'm going to illustrate that on two different problems. One, I'm going to take the simplest part, just consider Fokker-Planck equation, and show that for this we can do plain WKB, which is something that will not surprise many of you, but maybe some of you are not fully aware of how similar the two questions are, so I'm going to do that. And then we'll consider something a little bit, so that's new result that we got in the last few months. And I sort of like this story, so I'm going to tell you about Thomas Fermi approximation and things like that. Okay, let's go. So here I'm going to consider only one part of the mean field game problem, which is the Fokker-Planck equation. So here it is, and you have noise, which is sigma square. First thing, I multiply everything by sigma 2, okay? So now you have sigma 2 here, and sigma 4 here. And then I change notation. Sigma minus 2, I call it lambda, okay? So now it's lambda minus 1, lambda minus 1, lambda minus 2. So my Fokker-Planck equation, I can write it as some operator times the density, where this operator has this structure. And this structure is what Maslov has called a lambda pseudo-differential operator. And this just means that whenever I have a differential, there's a lambda minus 1 going with that differential. And that's basically the only thing you need to do WKB. And this is not a Hermitian operator, but that's not a problem at all. As soon as you have the structure of lambda pseudo-differential operator, you can define a classical symbol. So, spatial derivative, you call it momentum. Time derivative, you call it energy. So you have this classical symbol, and you have a classical dynamics associated with this classical symbol, which is just Hamilton equation of motion. So it's the usual thing. And then you can define what you call a semi-classical initial state. So it's just something with a prefactor and something with an exponential with the large term lambda here, and you are interested in the lambda going to infinity limit of that problem. So one example would be a Gaussian, like this one. In this case, S is just a square here. So that's a typical problem we want to solve. Now, to this semi-classical initial state, we can, as always, associate a Lagrangian manifold. So in 1D, a Lagrangian manifold is just a big word to say a curve. Okay, so this is a curve. And this curve, at each point, x, you associate a momentum. So this is in phase space. And this momentum is the gradient of the action here. And for a Gaussian, so this is quadratic, so this is linear. And if you remember, this is exactly the same manifold as the one Steve was showing yesterday for the same reason, because he was considering a Gaussian. The only difference is that he had I here, because he was doing quantum mechanics, and I'm doing Fokker-Planck. Okay, then from this initial Lagrangian manifold, you have the equation of motion associated with your Hamilton equation of motion. You propagate that. You have a Lagrangian manifold, and from that you have everything to compute the solution. And so the action is just as usual the integral of this one form, and you have a semi-classical evolution, which is again a prefactor. So this is written for 1D, but you have the equivalent expression for any dimension, and this is the phase. So it's not, I will call it a phase, except that there's no imaginary term, so it's just an exponential. And so The only difference with usual WKB, of course, this lambda is not 1 over h bar, but 1 over sigma square. And we used to have an imaginary term here when this is real. And the other difference is that term, which is due to the fact that your operator is non-hermetic. And so you need to be careful and you have this extra term. But that's not a big deal. So let me apply that to one drift field who came up in a problem we were considering, which is called the seminar problem. I will not say anything about this seminar problem, except that the drift field, so this is time, this is space, and you have 3 regions. In region 0 and 2, the drift field is just a constant. And in this, in this area, then it's a linear drift field. And we want to solve that semi-classically, basically. And so let's start, slowly. So we have 2 regions where A is a constant. So assume that A is a constant everywhere. You can compute, the action, the prefactor. Then, the extra phase term is 0 because the derivative of A is 0. And you have this expression. So you may not recognize it. But if you go to the mu go to 0 limit, to infinity limit, which means that the width of your Gaussian becomes 0. So what you compute is actually the Green function. This is the exact Green function. And you can check that this is actually the exact solution for the Gaussian. So with this semi-classical approach here for A equal constant, you actually get the exact result for Fokker-Planck. For a linear drift, again, S is that, the prefactor is that. Now you need to compute this extra phase, and that's not very difficult. You get a result, and presumably you are less familiar with that, but this is again the exact result, and this is the exact Green function. And I stress that you can also impose Dirichlet boundary condition, and this will give rise to a kind of reflective wave, as in WKB, and this could be included here too. So for the problem we want to solve, so again, then it's a bit more complicated. You have to patch the different regions. So then you have explicit analytical expression, but they are so ugly that I won't show them to you, but you can use them. And the important thing is that you have something which is a kind of figure of merit of this semi-classical approximation, which is the ratio between a drift time and a diffusion time. It can be expressed in this way, and it's proportional to sigma squared. So clearly, this is the non-dimensional quantity, which is essentially h bar. And so it's actually time dependent. When you evolve, it's small in the beginning, and here you have a superposition between the exact result and the semi-classical one. The exact are the dash curve, and the semi-classical is the solid curve. But for small k, you cannot distinguish one from the other. And as k increase, you see that there's a small discrepancy, but even for k of order 1, it's still a very good approximation. Okay, and so that's nice. And we see that we have this relation between semi-classics and the Fokker-Planck that we can use in the context of mean field game. So I'm going to stop about this WKB approximation, and now move to the second part, where I'm going to use another semi-classical approximation, which is the Thomas Fermi approximation. And we'll see that question of integrability is going to kick in that discussion. Okay, so let's start again. Same equation as before, mean field game equation. And they are coupled because A is the gradient of U and M is the agent density that you compute here, but that you need here. And I'm going to consider the situation where this mean field has this form. So there's a one body part and an interaction part. And I will assume that the interaction between the agent is repulsive. So G here is negative. Okay. And so next step, I consider the strong interaction regime, which means that in some sense, the gradient of the potential is much smaller than the gradient of the density, and the healing length, eta, is much smaller than any characteristic length of your problem. And what this means is that for the rest of this discussion, I'm going to neglect completely U0 because of this relation, and I will just keep that term in the mean field potential. Okay, good. And now, not only in that situation, but quite generically, there's a very important theorem in mean field game about what is called the ergodic state. So let me go through what is this ergodic state. So it says that, under various conditions, typically you don't want your mean field potential to have an explicit dependence in time. You can have a dependence in time through M, but not directly, okay? And you consider the long optimization time, which in principle is the one which is difficult to handle. For short optimization time, numerically, it's short time, you can do something. You may feel that you will be in trouble if you need to do the optimization for a very long time. And what this tells is that under generic condition, most of the time, you stay in an ergodic state, which is time independent. So nothing happened, basically. And you solve, the equivalent of what in quantum mechanics we would call the time independent equivalent of the equation. Okay, so let's see a numerical example. So we have a finite box. U0 is kept equal to 0 in this example. This is one-dimensional, so this is position, this is time, and this is the density of agents. So it starts, with some initial density. It's spread out, so then it's relatively flat here, and then because of the final condition we impose, then suddenly it reforms as a relatively dense group. So don't be tricked by, the relative simplicity of what is going on. It's not what we are used to in physics, which is you start with some initial condition and you propagate forward. Because here, first, you have two coupled quantity, m and the value function u, but when you start, you don't know what is the correct drift field for m, for the Fokker-Planck equation. So the only thing you can do is to guess a drift field, and then you solve Fokker-Planck. So you move forward. And then, with the m you have computed, you can propagate backward the Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation. So you propagate backward, and then you deduce a drift field, but this is not the one you started with. So you need to propagate forward and backward until you reach self-consistency. So it's really a self-consistent problem, and numerically it's not simple to achieve self-consistency. But in the end, you get this solution. So of course, in the middle, it's hard to see what is going on. So let's go to a two-dimensional plot. And actually, here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 curves. And what you see is that nothing happened. So that's the meaning of the ergodic state. For a long period of time, the density is constant. Now, this is possible, of course, because we have a finite box. So, density spread out, reach the edge of the box here, and then it stops, and that's your ergodic state. But if you have a very large box, then of course, it would take an infinite time to reach this ergodic state. So, it's clear that to have an ergodic state means that you actually need, everything in the middle is trivial. The only difficulty is to know what is going on from here to here. So there's no long time involved in your problem. So it's a great simplification of the analysis. So here, it seems that for an infinite box, losing this simplicity. So is it true? So let's do again some numerics. So be careful. Now time 0 is on the other side of the box. And we start with a relatively narrow density. This is the result of the self-consistent calculation. And the boundary condition is such that you let the system disperse. And, okay, it's, of course, you are not reaching ergodic state. So now let's look at, again, a two-dimensional plot. So this is the density for 3 different times. And if you look at it, they look very much like inverted parabola, okay? And actually, if you plot a parabola with the good value of z of t is basically the width of your parabola, you realize that it's exactly an inverted parabola. So you would superpose the two exactly, except, you know, for this very small deviation in the tail of the distribution. So so an inverted parabola, which is something which is normalized. There's only one parameter, which is the width, so it can be expressed in this way with a width z of t. And you can check numerically that z of t scales as the power 2/3. So it seems that you don't have an ergodic state, but you have something which is almost as good, which is a scaling solution of your equation. And the question is, how can we understand this scaling solution? So that's what I'm going to try to explain here. And so to explain that, we need to do a few transformations. And once the problem is posed in the correct term, then the answer is excessively simple. So bear with me. I'm going to walk you through this various transformation. And we'll reformulate the problem in a very different way, but then the answer will be essentially trivial. Okay? So the first step of this transformation is to introduce a change of variable that we have introduced, you know, a few years ago. And so in this paper, so the longer version of this paper grew very much. So it evolved into a physics report that just came out a few weeks ago. And you know, the nice and good idea is that you can introduce, so the initial variable, again, are m, the density of agent, and u, which is the value function. And what you can do is to introduce 2 new variables, so they play the same role, but it's the same information. So where m is just the product of these two new functions, and u is just essentially the log of phi up to this factor, which is essentially h bar. And if you do that, the very nice and quite mysterious thing is that the equation fulfilled by gamma and phi are just the nonlinear Schrödinger equation, except that you don't have an I here. So again, it's with, it's in for imaginary time in some sense, but it's exactly the same thing as what you would write for a system of interacting both particles in the mean field limit. And so using that, you access everything which is known by people working on the nonlinear Schrödinger equation since almost a century, maybe more. And so you have a lot of tools, and you can just use this tool. Okay, so we did that. So so one of these tools is to go to what is called hydrodynamic variables. And hydrodynamic variable, basically you go back to m, which is just the density, but the other variable v is defined in this way in terms of phi and gamma, and basically in such a way that it's the drift field velocity for m. Okay, so and you have for v an equation which is a bit more complicated, but we assume u0 is 0 because we are in the large G limit. And semi-classics, this is a term of order h bar square in some sense, so we are going to neglect it. And this is what is called in this field the Thomas Fermi approximation. And now there's a last modification, so it's not so much a change of variable that just a scaling. So instead of m, we take the square root of m with this scaling, and we call it eta. And v, we just call it xi. And this is because, you know, for this kind of equation, you have Riemann invariant, and xi and eta are just the real part and the imaginary part of this Riemann invariant. And this is the usual notation in that field, so we keep that notation. But whenever you see eta, think about it as the square root of the density. And whenever you see xi, this is just our velocity field here. Okay. So we have our hydrodynamic variable with this Riemannian nomenclature. And the next step is to do what is called an Hodograph transform. So what is an Hodograph transform? The notion here is that this is a nonlinear equation because, for instance, you have v squared here, you have mv here. So this is nonlinear. So because it's nonlinear, it's complicated. On the other hand, it's first order in the derivative. So it means that if you exchange what are the variables and what are the unknown, then you transform your problem into a problem with higher derivative, but a linear problem. Okay. So if you do that, then there's a little bit of algebra involved, but what you get is that in the end, you can introduce a potential representation, so a function xi of eta and xi. So again, eta is the density and xi is just the velocity. This function fulfills this Laplace equation in cylindrical coordinate. So it means that you can think about xi as being the vertical direction and eta as being the radial direction, and you have cylindrical symmetry. And then it's just the usual Laplace equation of electrostatics. So you can think about this as being the solution of an electrostatic problem. And then from this potential, you can deduce an electric field, just take the gradient. And then, you know, when you do the algebra, this electric field fixes t and x, which is now what you are trying to compute. Okay? So this is nice. You have transformed your nonlinear problem into a linear problem. But it's not completely trivial how you implement the boundary condition. Because remember, the boundary conditions are expressed in terms of the original variable. And now that's the unknown. So it seems, you know, that you have not necessarily simplified your problem. And, you know, just consider what is going on at t equals 0. What you should do, so pick a solution of this problem. Deduce x and t from the data of the electric field. So you have this equation and you can invert that. So you could in principle do it. Now you need to locate the surface which corresponds to t equals 0, which should depend on how you know, on the way you solve that starting from your initial. And then you should check that on that surface you have the boundary condition, which is that x is the inverse of this function m0 for whatever is m of x. So it doesn't seem like a simple problem to solve, but okay, you can do something else. And this something else is, okay, boundary conditions are complicated, but you can use the fact that the problem is linear. And if it's linear, it means that you can think about it as being your potential is created by charges, by a distribution of charges. But so this is actually, okay, let me go back to that, a numerical solution of the problem for some condition. I will not insist on that. And in the eta xi plane, you have a line here which corresponds to t equals 0, and a line here which corresponds to t equal uppercase t, so the final time. So what you know is that between these two lines, you need to fulfill the Laplace equation. So it means you don't have any charges there. But you may have charges outside or inside. And these charges are related in a one-to-one relation with the boundary condition. So again, it's not clear that you have simplified your problem, except that now you can do a multipolar expansion. So a multipolar expansion, that's what you do in electrostatics. So you write your potential chi in this way, where the P are just the usual polynomial, and Q are charges associated, are just parameters that you have to fix and that they will determine what is your actual potential. And here in this expansion, for L positive, this corresponds to what is created by the charge inside close to 0, and the negative L corresponds to the charge far away at infinity. But now, if you are considering time range where t is large but small in front of the final time, so you are in this intermediate region, which is the one for which you have the scaling behavior, then you may just keep the monopolar approximation. And then things becomes extremely simple. So you can do what I suggested. So I think I even have the time to do that. So then psi is just this, Q0 divided by R, and R is square root of eta squared plus psi2. You write the electric field in this way, and then you note that eta simplifies, which means that T is just given by that. If this is just T, it means that you can transform this into that, and you let this term goes on the opposite side, and it means that psi is just related to X and T with this simple linear relation. And then you start again from there. You put the denominator here, T on the other side, everything to the power 2/3, and you get this relation. And with, just a little bit of rearranging, this is just the inverted parabola we wanted to search. And the only question that remains is, what is Q0 now? But we sort of know what is Q0. This has to be normalized. So, this quantity Q0 has to be related in some way to the integral of the density. So let's just check it. And for that, we go to Electrostatic 101, go slow, and you just have to take on any surface, so for instance, the one at t equal uppercase T, the integral of the flux of the electric field. And so there's a little bit of algebra, not a lot, and at the end of the day, you have one part which is a total integral and which is actually 0, and another one which is x times the derivative of eta squared. So you integrate by part, and this is just the integral of the density, which is by construction 1. And so it means that you have this expression. If you replace Q0 by this value, then m of xt has this parabolic form with a scaling into the power 3. Okay, so we understand our scaling. And just a last comment about the multipolar coefficient, the other one. Actually, and we can discuss that if this U0 is 0, is null, then the Thomas Fermi approximation is an integrable problem, and you can understand all the charges as the constant of motion of this integral problem. And for positive L, this integral of motion are the usual ones. So, Q1, you can see it's related to momentum, Q2 to energy, etc., etc. And the negative one, they are sort of the unusual one, and you can understand Q minus 2 as just the initial time. So, that's sort of. So, this being said, I think I can reach the conclusion. So, I hope I convince you that the limit sigma square goes to 0 of the mean field game equation had a strong formal similarity with the quantum h bar goes to 0 limit. So for the Fokker-Planck equation, you can write a WKB approximation which shares, many things with our usual WKB approximation and which works beautifully well. And in the large repulsive interaction limit, where we can neglect the variation of U0, the system becomes actually integrable, and the semi-classical Thomas Fermi regime can then be addressed with this potential representation, where the charges of the multipolar expansion are just the invariant of this integrable problem. Okay, and you can understand the scaling behavior with the monopolar approximation. Thank you.
I want to ask about something that you probably